So in this video, I'm gonna be just kidding. In this video, I'll be explaining ear training and how we're gonna move from a rough sense of relative pitch to a fine sense of relative pitch. But before we get to that, I'd like to know how you did with Twinkle Twinkle. Leave a comment below. Was it difficult for you to translate the melody into scale degrees? Did you make any mistakes? Were you able to finish? If not, try to finish, and when you do, check your answers against the degrees of the C major scale, which you can also trigger below on this page. When you play back the notes of the scale using the degrees that you've written, does it sound like the original? If not, focus in on where it goes off the rails. Was your sense of the melody's direction correct? Were you too high or low? If it did sound like the original, did you try another more challenging melody afterwards? How did you do? As you move through this process, what do you notice about your own approach? Were you able to resist using your instrument long enough to involve your ear? How comfortable were you trusting your own ear? There is nothing quite like working a melody out by ear. It feels amazing, and I can't quite describe it any other way than musical confidence, and I hope you're beginning to experience it too. Before we move on to other melodies and talk about ear training in this video, I want to reiterate what I hope has already become clear through this exercise. These scale degrees create for us an opportunity. We can take something vague and make it identifiable, and not only that, immediately useful. And if this melody can fit on the grid and go from briefly existing in the air to living as a scale degree, then it stands to reason that other melodies can make the same transition. If you can suspend for a moment the urge to search for that tab or tutorial, you can give your ear and your understanding of melody a chance to develop into something formidable. Tabs and tutorials are not evil, but they serve as a crutch. And if you're always on crutches, how will you ever work your way up to running? I've created a list of example melodies with the first line already revealed to you. I call them song puzzles because it will be up to you to fill in the rest. And we'll talk more about these song puzzles throughout the rest of this module. Now let me say something here to encourage you. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you couldn't work out Twinkle Twinkle with utter ease, you're not alone. Keep in mind that your ear needs to become familiar with melodic motion, whether a melody is moving up, down, or staying the same. And that this kind of thing doesn't happen instantaneously, especially not for those who have never done this kind of active listening before, like translating raw sound into scale degrees. Indeed, ear training, similar to playing a new sport for the very first time, may leave some of you feeling like you're even out of your depth. For many of us, the struggle is real, and melody may be a weakness of yours that you've successfully avoided up until now. You don't know how brave you are to be here. Confronting your weakness head on is not easy stuff. Congratulations. And fear not. Now that we've covered a considerable amount of music theory with regard to melody, hopefully you can see that establishing a sense of relative pitch is attainable. So how do we go from a rough sense of pitch to a finely tuned sense of pitch? How do we train our ear? I mentioned in an earlier video that ear training is simply getting your ear to the place where it can recognize or identify what's happening in music. To explain exactly how to do that, imagine with me for a moment that we don't know a thing about what to do with ear training, and that we haven't already been moving towards that goal. Without knowing how melodies move, up, down, or stay the same. Without learning about half steps or semitones and how they can describe melodies, without the awareness of the fact that they map to frets on a string, and without realizing that most popular melodies use the same tonal relationships again and again, known as the major scale, aka whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and that the major scale establishes a base for us to understand the rest. It makes complete sense why most people learning music on the internet turn to random guessing and superficial formats. But now that we have these working theory concepts in place, we have a meaningful way to finally engage our ears. Ear training, when combined with music theory, as I've said, creates an explosion of musicianship. And now you know why. Before knowing about melodic motion and half steps and the major scale, we would be cooking without time or measuring ingredients. We would be painting without any regard for colors or shapes. Or we'd be building without measuring or calculations. But now we have a way to know with precision when we've overcooked a steak, or painted a portrait that doesn't quite resemble the thing we had in mind, or built that wobbly chair. Did you make any mistakes in Twinkle Twinkle? Did you make any mistakes in a more challenging melody you chose? There is a reason I asked you about the mistakes that you made in the beginning of this video. It's because the mistakes you make are as much a part of the process as the correct answers are. The scale degrees, as you check them by playing them back, will tell you whether you were too high, too low, or right on. The major scale and its scale degrees 1 through 8 tell you whether you're recreating that dish, painting that impeccable portrait, or building that even, steady chair. And if you haven't made any mistakes with that, you will. If you've made plenty of mistakes, that's a good thing. How you deal with the mistakes that you make in melody are the key to this entire thing. Any wrong answers in and of themselves mean nothing, but what they reveal about your ear and your thought process is everything. A mistake tells you that somewhere along the way you made an assumption you shouldn't have. Seeing where this happened in your approach to a given melody and how that impacts you going into the next melody that you try is where the learning happens. The rougher aspects of your melodic process or your lack of familiarity with relative pitch can only be smoothed out if you know where those parts are. The more you process melodies, the more familiar you become with melodic motion and tonal relationships. A word to those of you who are impatient. You are your own worst enemy. You're your own biggest obstacle. I get it. You wanted to hear yourself play the entire melody correctly. In fact, in your haste to do this exercise, you skipped some things that were important in between. You tried to move too quickly from the music you love, because I know you love Twinkle Twinkle, to the music you make, without spending enough time on the in-between. What you need to do is take a step back and actually examine what's happening in your mind and in your ear as you go. As I have said, it isn't magic. It may appear like magic to some when I work out a melody quickly, but in reality, in my own process, there are all these little steps happening in between. But if we slow that process down and look at each step in between and truly listen, you can do it too. Now that we have an idea that working out a melody is actually a process and not some magical ability that only a few people have, we can move into some actual examples. Before you try the first song puzzles that I'm about to share with you, remember what I said about mistakes as you're going into them. Remember that mistakes are not damning, but revealing. What do they say about your process? Where do you stumble? So, what exactly is a song puzzle? A song puzzle is exactly what it sounds like. Take a tune you know, a famous melody, or a song you used to sing as a child. It could be any melody that you have to solve. Now for the first song puzzles I'm giving you, we're going to start with simple melodies and move on towards more difficult ones as we go. You'll be given a few scale degrees or perhaps even an entire line to help give you a reference on where to get started, and you get to fill in the rest. And you'll know that you've solved it when you check your scale degrees and they suddenly sound a lot like the original. You can also share the melodies that you think will work well for others right here on this page. We'll create a growing list of songs that will help us all refine our ear together. Comment below with a title or a link to the song, or even a few scale degrees if you've begun to work it out yourself. In the future, as we hone in on a finer sense of relative pitch, we'll use other familiar songs that bring up more complex aspects of melody. They'll introduce us to the different things that can show up, like changing octaves, or sharp or flat scale degrees, or changing keys, or other popular scales, etc. The best way to learn music is through the songs that you love. And as we move beyond these rudimentary examples and into the territory of melodies that you love, your ear will grow in exponential ways. Share your progress, post an update video of yourself, and let us know how you're doing with these song puzzles. I can't wait to hear about your progress. Join me in the next video where we'll go deeper into processing melody.